something that I really focus on as a soccer player and a professional soccer player is to make sure that I do things outside of soccer and I make friends outside of soccer that um, don't see me just for soccer, because there are so many other aspects of a person and characteristics of a person that isn't just their sport. So I think it is easy, like you said, to just look at an athlete and see how incredible they are and kind of pin them in their sport, but there's also so many other aspects to a person.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the first actual episode of this podcast since I decided to take a 2 month break. I'm your host, Hamza Islam. And if you're checking this out or this podcast out for the first time, this is a podcast where I talk to Gen Zers across different industries about their experiences and their story that have shaped them into who they are today. I created this podcast because I want to focus on what it means to be a human being from the perspective of the guest rather than talking about their journey or or rather than talking about the destination and all the success they have had. I want to talk about the journey because we see the destinations, but we don't see the journey. And so I want to focus on that as much as possible. And I hope you guys as listeners join me in continuing to emphasize the importance of having an open mind, because we don't know what other people are going through, regardless of how much success they look like they're having, because there's always something that they're currently going through or something that they went through to get to where they are. So I'm very excited to continue doing season 2 of this podcast, and I hope you guys continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible Gen Zers. Now, this week I'm speaking with Sentnor, who is a professional soccer player for the Utah Royals Football Club of the National Women's Soccer League. In January of this year, she was the first pick of the league's draft, or of the NWSL draft. Something I never thought I would say on this podcast, which is the fact that I get to interview a number one pick from a draft in a professional sports league, regardless if it's men's or women's. And as a soccer fan myself, it's always great to talk to professional soccer players. So, Ali Sentnor, thank you so much for joining me on Oh My Curry Goodness.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, and firstly, I just want to say, like I said, I'm a huge soccer fan. So anytime I get to interact with professional soccer players, it's a great feeling. Definitely not jealous, but I love interacting with people or interacting with them, and it's something that I've always loved to do since I was like 9 years old when I got to meet my favorite soccer players from the Columbus Crew, which is a team I'm a big fan of. And the thing is, and that's how I want to start our first conversation, which is the fact that, you are a professional soccer player, but you're also a human being. And when I was 9 years old, I used to forget that at the end of the day, professional athletes are human beings. Like they still have emotions and feelings just like everyone else. And I want to know from your perspective, because you're obviously one of the most exciting players to come out of this year's draft. Obviously, you're representing the U.S. Women's Youth National Team. You're also the number one pick, so there's obviously a lot of excitement. But at the end of the day, as a professional soccer player, as weird as it sounds, how hard is it to be known for simply being a human being?
Yeah, I think growing up, dedicating a lot of time to your sport, it definitely is something that starts to define you. And I think a lot of people see that your sport is what you're known for. So I think it has been something that I really focus on as a soccer player and a professional soccer player is to make sure that I do things outside of soccer and I make friends outside of soccer that um don't see me just for soccer, because there are so many other aspects of a person and characteristics of a person that isn't just their sport. So I think it is easy, like you said, to just look at an athlete and see how incredible they are and kind of pin them in their sport, but there's also so many other aspects to a person.
For sure. And here's the thing, like one of the things I'd love to do whenever I interact with someone on my podcast is to get to meet them in person. But like obviously I want to know, like obviously one of the things that's really important to me is knowing that they're a human being. So when I see you in person, I don't want to think professional soccer player. I mean, I know that's a part of you, and I know you love soccer, but it's like at the end of the day, you are a human being just like everyone. And I know like even as a professional athlete, you just want to be known for existing as a human being. Now, as an athlete, I know it's for being a professional athlete in any sport is obviously a challenge, because there's so many people that want to pursue this dream, and yet very few get to actually pursue or have it. But I do want to know, I guess to maybe to for lack of a better phrase, to understand like what soccer, I guess like the deeper connection you have with soccer, I want to know if there was a soccer game you either played in or watched that kind of inspired you to be where you to be a professional soccer player. And for example, so even though I'm not a professional soccer player by any means, I think growing up, one of my favorite soccer games to watch was when United States played Algeria in the 2010 FIFA World Cup, and then seeing the reaction from everyone scoring when USA scored in like the 91st minute. So the fact that it's like with very few time remaining, you score the game-winning goal, and I think that emotion stuck with me. And I said to myself, because of that emotion, I want to hopefully do that in the professional level in the future if that ever becomes a reality. So in your case, was there a game you watched or played in where you remember the emotion or the reaction, and you were like, oh, because of this, I want to do this at some point on the professional level?
Yeah, I think for me, honestly, just grew up starting to play rec and starting to play in my town, and I just played it because all my friends played it, and I played it because it's what brought me joy. And I think that's one of the things I try to carry with me like throughout my journey is that I play soccer because I love it. I don't play it because it's a job, or I don't play it because someone else wants me to play it. I really do just enjoy it and love it. So I think that's like something that's really big is you need to really love what you do, and that the love for the game kind of never left me. So that's kind of why I wanted to continue to play and continue to pursue it. But talking about specific games, I think when we played in the college cups in at UNC and played in those NCAA games, we got a ton of fans, and it was just really cool. And I knew that going into the professional environment, we'd get even more fans and we'd get even more people like following our careers. So I just think it's really cool to play for that next generation as well. And then I think just watching all of the women's national team games and just the amazing crowds that they have brought in, and winning the 2015 World Cup was definitely kind of a realization for me that that's something I would want to do and that's a dream of mine. So I think just all of that put together has kind of inspired me to continue my career.
It's really interesting how much the women's how soccer, especially in women's soccer, there's been so much growth. And oftentimes there are obviously those like extreme haters that'll go, no one watches women's soccer. But then we've seen lately after like 2015, 2019, especially the 2023 Women's World Cup, where so many people are watching women's soccer and actually being engaged. And it's always exciting to see. And I want to touch on the fact that, like I said, that you're obviously people are saying a lot of great things about you and saying that you're one of the up and coming exciting soccer players in the United States. You obviously played for one of the best collegiate programs, like you mentioned, North Carolina, and here you are being the number one pick of the 2024 draft. And it's weird because it can be exciting and nervous at the same time. It's exciting because people at first it's like regardless of any professional sports league, that's a huge honor to have. But then at the same time, I think a lot of I mean, I guess a lot of sports critics would say like, oh, I guess if they have like a really if they don't have a good season, it's like we're only gonna know this person because they were the first pick. And rather than the fact that they were actually a great athlete on the field in whatever sport. So I guess what I'm trying to say is being the number one pick, as exciting as it is there a part that can sometimes intimidate or scare you, given that it's exciting, it's an honor to have. It's obviously because Utah Royals value the person you are, but there's always that concern of like, what if I don't live up to people's expectations? What will people say about me? I guess like, are you? What are your thoughts on like? Do you is it are you like? Does it excite you, or does it also like? I guess for lack of a better phrase, scare you or intimidate you in any way?
Yeah, I would say mostly excitement. I think if you look at it from a negative lens, then you're going to have a negative outcome. So I think just focusing on the opportunity in front of me, and it's a team sport. So at the end of the day, it's me just doing the best that I can to help the team. And I think just enjoying the journey and enjoying every team that I've been on and the team that I'm on right now, and just playing the game for the love of it. And I think one of my goals every day is just to improve and develop and be the best player in person that I can. So if I see that progress, then that's success to me. I think it's great to score goals and assists and wins, and the stats are great, but I think if you don't enjoy the game as the whole, then your career is um kind of just defined on stats, which is not what I am trying to focus on. So I think it's mostly just excitement and opportunity.
It's sad because I think a lot of people will determine success based on numbers. So, how many goals someone has, how many assists, if you're a goalkeeper, how many clean sheets. But what people don't see is the fact that if we take you for the case, because I've gotten to see a lot of Utah Royals games, at least on TV, not in person, but it's just the fact that you are obviously one of the hardest working players on the team. And it's not something that if people don't watch it, they'll go, well, who can well, this person is good or this person is bad. But you have to really watch the game because there's more to soccer than just scoring and getting assists, or if you're goalkeeper, in this case, a clean sheet. Now, one of the things that people may not understand about Utah Royals, in case they don't follow, in case they haven't had the chance to follow NWSL, is that it's an expansion team. And for those who don't know, expansion team is basically it's their first year in the league. Although Utah Royals do have some sort of history. With that being said, though, knowing that this is the first year with Utah Royals, tell me what it's like to, in a way, be a part of history. Because when Utah Royals have success, whether it's this season or in future seasons, in whatever league they compete in, you are one of the many people who people I guess can thank because you were representing Utah Royals every weekend, whether it's on the field or in training. What is it like to, in a way, be a part of history, or in this case, kind of bringing Utah Royals back? Because correct me if I'm wrong, I think they were once part of Kansas City, and then there was some weird change. There were some changes. Here you are in Utah. What is it like to be a part of the inaugural season?
Yeah, I think being an expansion team, it's definitely an opportunity. I think I've talked about it before. It's we have the opportunity as the players right now to kind of build this team from the ground up and just have a say and have and our actions are kind of what is building the values and the personality of this team. And I think that's kind of an honor. And I think that's something that not a lot of players get to do. So you can look at it from a lens as of we're not doing as well and um we're kind of starting off, but I think in a way that's kind of exciting and that means like our potential is just so extreme and there's just so much more ways to go for our team and to be a part of that journey is both hard and challenging, but it's also hopefully going to be rewarding in the future.
Off topic question, but I love your guys' jerseys, your yellow and blue jerseys. Now, what's interesting is I love it's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem nevertheless. So for those who don't know, Utah Royals have a yellow jersey and a blue jersey. I want to ask you. I don't know if this is a good question to ask, but what would you say from as a fan? What would you recommend, the yellow or the blue jersey?
Um, I like both of them. I don't really have a strong preference. I mean, we've only worn the blue ones once, so we've mostly worn the yellows.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind. I'll get the yellow jersey, and then on the back, I'll make sure it's Sentnor number 9, and then we'll go for
Awesome.
it. um, Now, as a athlete, a lot of athletes will say that they've learned more from their losses than their wins, and it's a question I used to ask a lot of my guests. Well, it's similar to how I used to ask them, what is something that they're grateful for, even though at the time they thought it was the worst day of their life because I've often had people say gratefulness comes from not just positive experiences, but negative experiences as well. So, as a professional athlete, what would you say was like the best loss you've had in your career? Which I know is a weird question to ask, but I want to know like it's a loss where at the time you thought it was like the worst day of your life, but you're able to sit back today and go, in a weird way, if I didn't lose that game, I would not have become the person I am today because I've learned so much, not just as a person, but also as a professional athlete.
Yeah, I think honestly, you can learn something different from every single loss and every win. I think the we've had a few losses this year, and I think just the way that the team has kind of like rallied around each other, and it's really hard to do that when you're losing. It's much easier to have a good attitude and have a good time with each other and connect when everything is going well. But I think that the way our team is holding themselves and the way that we are coming together and lifting each other up and kind of getting back up from falling down after every single loss is what's going to hopefully define this team and like create the foundation that we need. So I think the losses this season have really helped are going to help us in the future, even if it seems like every week we're kind of just getting punched down again. But it's going to get to a point where we're going to build that foundation so strong that like it's going to be hard to get us down, you know?
Yeah, I totally get it. I want to end the podcast by talking about, well, I mean, obviously, I focus this as much as possible, which is the fact that you are a human being. But when I was going through your LinkedIn blog posts, and one of the things that you talk a lot um, is the importance of friendships, and which is really weird because I think there's a difference. I mean, I think you can probably agree to this. There's a difference between someone saying, I'm a fan of you and I'm a friend of yours, because they don't always mean the same thing. And I think for you, I think your most loyal fans are the ones who knew you before being known as the number one pick or being a professional athlete or being a soccer player. So one of my a question I ask, and it's another weird question I ask, which is, what would you lose if you were to lose friends? And I say that because there's often a deeper meaning behind something. So it's not just that you lose something. There's something much more deeper that you lose, that it kind of change it would change your whole lifestyle or your personality in a way. So as someone who emphasizes the importance of friendships, what I mean, this is a hypothetical situation, and I hope it never happens, but what would you lose if you were to lose friendships?
I think it's hard to enjoy life and enjoy just life itself and the successes and the ups and downs without other people to share it with. I think friendships are so important in the day-to-day life, but also just for me, I'm an extrovert, so I just enjoy hanging out with people and being around people for the majority of my day. But I think if you weren't to have people to share your successes with, your failures with, your learning moments with, your humor with, then it would just kind of be a very lonely life.
What would you This is a question I usually ask. I mean, this is a question I've been thinking about lately, which is like, what do you look for, or what makes a good friend? And I think a lot. I mean, I don't know. I get loyalty a lot from people, whether it's people I've interacted off the podcast or on the podcast. From in your mind, what do you think makes a good friend? Do you think it's all about loyalty, or do you think there are other factors that make a good friend in your case?
I think one of the things would be empathy. One of the main things because it's a hard skill to put yourself in someone else's shoes, but when you do and you show a true caring, and empathy towards that person, it just makes them a truer friend. And then I also think just being there for people in the hard times and the good times. I think especially with women and in women's sports, sometimes it's not taught to lift each other up. But there as you get older, you learn that there's success is for everyone and everyone can be successful. And the more you lift each other up, the more successful you will be. So I think like learning as a friend to celebrate each other's successes and that successes can be yours as well is something very important, especially in women's sports.
You may have answered my next question, but I'd still love to know your thoughts on this, which is, I think for a lot of us, and this is something that I struggle with all of my friends, which is, I think my biggest fear when it comes to the idea of friendships is, I guess, when you think that you're being a good friend to others, but to them they don't think that you're being a good friend. You might think of them, you might try to do your best to be the best friend possible, but maybe to them they kind of think of you as annoying or like intimidating or being a burden. So for you, what would you say are some of your biggest fears when it comes to friendships? I know you talked about empathy, which obviously is really challenging, but are there other things that come to mind when it comes to, I guess the fear of friendships, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think it's hard when to open up to someone knowing that you could lose them as a friend or anything for that matter. I think you have to be committed, and sometimes being committed and opening up can be scary. So I think that's one thing that can be fearful about friendships. But I think that if you're not vulnerable and you're not fully committed, then you're never going to get the most out of the friendship either.
I've two questions before I let you go. My one of the two is you not only want to be the best athlete on the field, but you also have a mission to be the best athlete off the field and inspiring the future generation. And obviously, I know you're still, I mean, you're only 19 years old, but, or not, sorry, 19, 20, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're still young, but the fact is that you have a mission to inspire more women to be involved in the sport. And I think the idea of inspiration can be exciting and also maybe a lot of pressure because even though you're one of many people that have this mission, the fact that you're still a part of this mission can be you. I guess you want to be, for lack of a better term, you want to be the best version of you possible, so that people can look at you and go, okay, I see Ali doing this. I think I can do it as well. Why is that important to you? And secondly, is there any pressure when it comes to being an inspiration because you have good intentions, but it's sometimes you're like, what if I'm not doing enough at the end of the day?
Yeah, I wouldn't say pressure. I would say once again, it's excitement and an opportunity. It's I'm grateful to be in a position where I can inspire, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. I wouldn't say pressure, but it's an honor to have that responsibility, and not a lot of people get to be in that position. So I think it's just doing the best that I can and knowing that that is going to be enough, and that will, even if it helps one, two younger girls follow their dreams, then that's enough.
My last question is a signature question that I want to start asking people in the future. I hope it's a good question, but I can always cut it, which is that even though you're the number one pick, and obviously you've had a lot of success, there's also challenges and obstacles that can come with your success. And at the end of the day, this is something that only you know, not everyone else. So the question I want to ask people, and I want to start with you, and hopefully it's something that I ask people in the future, which is, even though you've had a lot of success, what would you say currently, what would you say right now is the hardest thing about being Ali Sentnor?
Um, I would say going into a new league, obviously, just being drafted, allowing myself grace and not nothing has to be perfect right now. I'm still learning and I'm still very new, and I'm um still adjusting to a new location, a new team, a new league. So I think just giving myself grace in all of those areas and truly just getting back to enjoying the game and having fun. And so I think there's a lot of factors that come with everything being new and wanting to excel right away. But I think just allowing myself the time to adjust.
You are obviously in the middle of the NWSL season, and I know that you have a very busy stretch coming up. So I will let you go, but I just want to say, Ali, thank you so much for being a guest on this podcast. And it's always great to be able to speak with professional soccer players and get to know their personal experiences. So thank you so much for joining, and I hope we get to meet in person one day.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.